know you're wondering, are the red lace chiaogoo interchangeable needles really worth the hype? 6 months ago, I decided to take the plunge and find out for myself, so you don't have to. In this past 6 months, I have knit the sabai top, some Sophie scarves, this step-by-step sweater. I'm working on the cloud sweater, and I self-drafted a poncho as well using these needles. So I think I have a fair amount of projects under my belt to give you guys a good review and opinion of if you should splurge as well. Now, if you're listening to those patterns and you're like, well, those sound kind of basic, that's because I actually started knitting last summer. So I'd been knitting for about a month before I bought the chiaogoos, and at the end of the day, I wanted to be able to knit whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, without having to wait until the next day the yarn store is open for me to go buy needles for me to work on a project. If I had the yarn in my stash, I want to be able to do it. So I just needed any interchangeable set. I didn't necessarily need the chiaogoos. So first I'm going to dive into why I chose chiaogoo as the first set for me to try out in the attempt of finding the right needles for me. Next, I'm going to go into my favorite aspects of the kit, why I love it, and then I'm also going to go into some of the disappointments that I had in the kit. After that, we're going to go into a Q&A. I asked my Instagram stories what you guys wanted to see and know about the chiaogoo sets 6 months into my using them, and let me tell you, the responses were kind of overwhelming. And finally, we will get to the very good stuff where I will walk you through everything that's in the kit, including the needles, the accessories, and what I find myself using again and again. You might be wondering, okay, Emily, if you'd only been knitting for a month, how did you know that the chiaogoo set is well known? Well, I had been crocheting for a couple of years before I started knitting, and I was a part of knitting groups during that time, in person. I had a very large network of knitters who had vastly more experience than I still do, decades of experience, individually, not even combined. I'm sure that there's at least a few centuries worth of knitting experience in each one of the individual groups that I'm in, which is wild to think about. Anyway, I brought up my concerns. I don't want to have to keep buying individual needles and having to wait to go buy them in order to work on them. I also don't want to pay the hefty price of fixed circular needles, because if you buy them individually, it's way more expensive. For example, I am currently holding in my hand $40 to $50 worth of knitting needles. Yes, there's only 3. The price adds up so much, and the breaking point for me was working on the sabai top, which was my first knit garment, because I didn't hit gauge immediately with the US 6s that I had bought for it. And then in my head, I'm like, okay, well, how many more am I going to have to buy? I tried with the 7s, the 7s don't work, and then I have to work with the 8s, and then the 8s work, so I have to buy an extra 8. That math did not math for me. And when I was talking to a friend of mine, he mentioned that there are some products that are sold at a lower price point, so they're more accessible individually, but you end up being poorer in the end by choosing that, which is kind of like the whole fast fashion thing, right? Like, you choose to buy clothes at a fast fashion place, you can only wear it a few times before it disintegrates in the wash, and then you have to buy it again, versus spending half of that amount of that cycle throughout, let's say, a decade, half that amount on high quality clothes, or clothes that you made yourself, using high quality materials, and you'll be way better off. So that for me was enough to justify the splurge. The very first thing that the knitters in my knitting group told me to do was to try bamboo and aluminum in order to see which one I prefer, because bamboo is stickier, so it's easier for beginners not to lose their stitches. But again, it's stickier, it's a slower process. I found that the aluminum was a lot more fun to work with, and I did not drop my stitches as much as I thought I would as a beginner. So that's how I ended up choosing the aluminum over bamboo. Yeah, I didn't try plastic, I didn't try any other types. I liked the aluminum well enough. Or is this stainless steel? I liked the chiaogoos enough to be able to say, okay, I like this format, I like this company, it's high quality, and I am comfortable splurging on an actual set for it. Something else that I was able to work out thanks to the lovely knitters in my knitting group was what size I wanted to work with. So these are still the fixed ones that I had purchased prior to the set. So I have the shorter ones, which is the 4-inch tips, and then these that are the 5-inch tips. And so having worked with both, I found that I had less hand pain with the 5 inches versus the 4. So if I'm holding it, there's still a little bit of metal popping out with the 5s versus the 4 where it's really at the end. I get a little bit of cramps here, if you can see that, because of how tight it is. So, and even though these are thicker, this is a US 8, they're US 6s. That's a little bit of context for you, and you can do something similar. Although at the end I'm going to give you a recommendation that will probably save you guys more money in the long run. But nonetheless, try both. And then something you'll notice if you've been looking online at chiaogoo sets is that the prices vary so much from vendor to vendor. I was looking specifically at the time where chiaogoo was raising their prices. So I think it was around $200 prior to last year. I think it was because of the whole tariff thing. And then it went up to $270. I saw a place even selling for almost $300, which was, wow, sticker shock. So what I did was I went to, first of all, yard sales, trying to get an older set. That did not play out for me. I spent maybe like 3 or 4 weekends, and then I was like, okay, this is taking too much time. I went to a couple of yarn stores to see who had yet to raise their prices. Some of them had, some of them had not. I do like to support small businesses, and so if I was able to get a small business, including my rewards from going to that yarn store, because I have about 4 go-to yarn stores. So if I was able to match my rewards program with a yarn store that had not yet changed their prices, if I matched or beat the Amazon price, I was going to support a small business. That's exactly what I did. I went to one of the local yarn stores. I went and got this set, and it came out to the exact price that it would have been on Amazon. So I was pretty pleased with that. If you don't want to go jump through all those hoops, you could just go ahead and buy it straight off of Amazon. Every single person in the knitting groups that I asked advice from said that Amazon was the cheapest, and I wanted to go the hard way and find out for myself. By far, my favorite part of having this chiaogoo set isn't even working on the project itself, it's working on the gauge swatches. And I don't know why that's a surprise to me, because that was the biggest pain point of why I got them. So I can now comfortably do almost any gauge swatch that I want to do. And I can whip this up in the middle of the night if I want to, because I have all the needles at my disposal, which brought me so much freedom and peace of mind, because the anxiety I had about buying needles I already had accidentally because I didn't log them correctly or because I didn't have a centralized place to put them drove me insane, let me tell you. So these are cute little markers for gauge swatches by 7th Floor Yarns. I saw them at the New England Fiber Festival, and she was awesome. She threw these in for me, so thank you so much, and I'm having so much fun working with your mohair, let me tell you. If you have an interchangeable needle set already, you already know this peace of mind, but to me, holding up a gauge swatch like this is so emotional because there wasn't any frustration involved in making it and worry about what needles I would use. It was just a great experience. Honestly, my favorite parts about the set are just emotional, of just not having to worry, which is great. When I asked my experienced knitter friends what would be a one and done purchase that would last me hopefully my whole life, but I know realistically probably at least a decade, it was the chiaogoos. Although lots of different names of needles came up, they expressed that if I wanted to make a purchase that would last me and make me happy, and I would not be looking for a replacement for them for years, it had to be the chiaogoos. And let me tell you, I don't think they were far off. My disappointments are so lame and annoying compared to the peace of mind that it brings. I was looking through the questions for the Q&A, and I was like, oh yeah, like people have to deal with cables coiling and having memory. I don't even think about that. So it was a great like reality check to just not take the needles for granted. I will say to this whole one and done thing, there is a caveat, which is I have to be careful so the needles don't fall out. So if I'm looking at the large set, so some context, when you buy the set, you can buy either just the smalls, so that would be from US 2 to US 8, which corresponds to 2.75 millimeters to 5 millimeters. So you could buy just the small. You could buy just the large. So that's US 9 to US 15, which is 5.5 millimeters to 10 millimeters. Or you can buy the complete set, which is both. Again, going in theme of I don't want to have to worry about gauge swatching ever again, and I want to be able to knit almost anything at any time. The complete set really fit the bill for me. So I was very surprised, and I didn't realize this because I didn't need larger needles for a very long time. There's a jump between 6.5 millimeters and 8 millimeter needles. So I wanted to do another petite knit pattern. I can't remember off the top of my head right now. I ended up switching to the cloud sweater, which had needles that I already had. And I needed a 7 millimeter needle, which I didn't have in the set. 6.5 would have been close enough, but if it wasn't great, I didn't have anything in between. So I decided to buy the US 7s. I did not know this when I started. So you can just buy the tips, and then you can buy the cable separately. So instead of trying out the fixed ones, like I did over here, I think it would be a little bit more expensive to buy the tip and the cable separately. Editing Emily can insert what it would be. I think it may be like 20 bucks instead of 15. But then you would have, if you ended up buying this set, you'd have an extra tip of a needle that you use a lot. Just a thought, just an idea. But going back to the disappointment, yeah, I was not a fan of having that big whole, like 1.5 millimeter diameter jump. Okay, my other complaint about this set, and I'm going to demonstrate it to you right now if it'll decide to cooperate. Oh, there we go. If I open it, I don't know why it's behaving now, probably because I'm filming a video, but if I open it, this looks exaggerated right now, but I have opened it up and on a table just normally, and the tips just fly out. So this is honestly one of my primary complaints, is that the openings for the needles are outward and not inward, meaning that you insert the tips outward to in instead of this way, because that would mean that if they were to fall, they would fall into the center and not the floor, which would have been great. It's not the end of the world. I plan to upgrade the packaging. I want to get a leather case at some point, so it's not the end of the world, but it's just frustrating. And I'm glad it's only ever happened at home, because if it happened at a coffee shop and the sound of metal hitting a metal table would be mortifying. And now I have to spend the time to put these back where they belong. Do you see how that took up so much unnecessary time? Do you see how I just closed them and they fell out? I just closed this thing. Okay, I rest my case, okay? I rest my case. Another thing I really like about the needles is that the cables connect, so I can work on huge projects like this poncho by connecting the two largest cables that I have for a specific size, and then I can make something huge instead of having to go out and buy one huge cable. Okay, another complaint that I have about the set is that there aren't any redundant accessories. So there's one cable connector for each size, so one small and one large. There's only one pair of end stoppers per size. So the only redundancy is within the stitch markers, which are already thick. So for example, when I was working on this rib, I couldn't use the stitch markers that were there because they were too thick and they would leave a wobbly point in the knitting. So I'm not a huge fan of the stitch markers, but that's also just splitting hairs. We're finally into the question and answer section. Yay! Okay, first question is from Lily Knitting. Are they really worth the price compared to generic aluminum sets? And I'm going to be honest with you, I have not tried the generic aluminum sets. What I can tell you is common complaints are of coiling, of scratching, of the cables coming apart and dropping your stitches, and that just is not a problem. I have never once had stitches drop at the connection point, so between the cable and the needle, or the cable and the cable, never had that problem. Sometimes Knitter is asking, do I like this needle length or do I think I would have gone with a different one? I didn't know that there were different sizes until someone in my knitting group told me. So consider me your friend in knitting group, and I am telling you to try the 4-inch tip and the 5-inch tip. I'm not going to know how to say this. CROCHET, my guess is Australian, is asking everything, if you are a tight knitter or not to, how it compares to wood. So I think I mentioned that a little bit earlier, where the stitches kind of fly off of the aluminum in a good way. Actually, before I keep saying aluminum, let me Google what the chiaogoos are made out of. Okay, I just Googled it, and the Smart Artisan still has the red lace 4-inch tips, $220, so hop on that before they raise their price. Okay, stainless steel, my bad, not aluminum. Okay, so like I mentioned, the stitches just come straight off the stainless steel, which I find great because I want to knit as fast as possible. But if you prefer the wood individually, you might prefer a wood set. Alita Marinkovic asked, how well do they stay attached? So well. Incredibly well. I've never had to worry about it well. Now, I'm not lazy about my connecting. I use the T-pin. I'll show you guys. So I use the T-pin, and then I also use the red rubber, and I give it a good twist. So I don't ever just YOLO it without that good extra oomph. But once I do that, I literally don't even think twice. Detaching is not even a concern that I have. Chronic Chris is asking, have any pieces broken? Does yarn snag anywhere? And any hand cramps / fatigue? I have not had any pieces break so far, and I've used them almost every day up until my little hand cramp fiasco of Christmas / New Year's 2025. No pieces have broken. Knock on wood, I have not lost any of the small accessories either. So that's great news. The yarn does not snag. I think the only experience I had with snagging was when I was doing my huge poncho where I had connected 2 cables together using the connector, where sometimes if I did a lot of knitting and the project was heavy, the stitches wouldn't easily go over that little thicker connector part, so I would have to stop and move the stitches over. But when you're doing a round with over 300 stitches, doing that once around isn't that bad. Hand cramps and fatigue, that was entirely my fault. For 5 months, up until I decided to knit a sweater in 2 weeks, I'm gonna knit every single day until my hands hurt. How is that not asking for a stress injury? From the set itself, I have not had any hand cramps. You don't need to worry about it. If you try both tip sizes, you choose the right tip size. The needles are very, very light. Diego Larrea is asking the performance with different types of yarn. Sometimes it's too slippery or rough. So I have used the chiaogoos for 100% cotton. That was a very good experience, and that was my first project with the set. I used it with this Superwash Merino from Malabrigo. Also had a very good experience working with them. I probably have the label for it, I just am too lazy to look for it. So this is Bamboo Bloom by Universal Yarn, and it's got some roving to it and then some really tightly wound parts as well. This one was the big poncho with over 300 stitches at some point that I was working on, and this one I did actually drop a couple of stitches on for the thin part because I was using needles that had a better gauge for the roving part. This is the only one that I remember vividly losing a couple of stitches, but in a huge project I dropped stitches twice. So again, also grain of salt. So I think overall that's a pretty good experience. Baby Cat Yarns said, why is the bag so ugly? I have them too, LOL. Which is such a mood. Emily Sue is asking, is the clicking louder than other metal needles? We can do a click test right now. I just don't have metals that aren't chiaogoos. I am purposely choosing the thickest needles that are the most hollow. Theoretically, they would be the loudest. So yeah, they do clink, but how often are you using a US 15? So let's do something a little bit more normal. So I'm gonna grab a US 6. A lot less. Not me grabbing them. The bamboos have noise too, okay? Nothing is perfect. I do think that the sound of the stainless steel is sexier. Just saying. And with that, we have gone through all of the non-repeated questions. So thank you for submitting your questions on my stories. If you want to participate in more of this sort of interactive things or suggest ideas for videos, check out my Instagram. Thank you so much for watching this review of the chiaogoo interchangeables. I hope that I was able to answer your questions and quell any anxieties that you have about buying the kit, because it's one of the purchases that I think made the most sense and had the biggest payoff for me personally of 2025. I would love to see you with your new kit. So if you do post it on Instagram, like tag me in the comments, I want to see it. Of course, if you made it this far in the video, please do all the things. It helps my videos reach more people and it helps me be able to make more videos and cool patterns for you guys. So if you're interested in the set, you're probably also interested in other knitting. So check out this video about the sabai top that I made. And I hope to see you in the next one.